up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV, aka Darth Apocalypse. All right, so I checked out this documentary on Netflix on Pele, and look, I will be the first to admit that I know very little about what the world refers to as football, not American football, but football slash soccer, right? And outside the United States, it is the most popular sport in the world. And the World Cup, which just occurred, which was partially why LeBron was withholding his decision because the World Cup was the most popular thing going on globally. But growing up, whenever football slash soccer was discussed, the name that I always consistently heard as far as being the greatest was Pele. Now, since then, there have been some other guys who have claimed or made claims for the throne. Maradona, Ronaldo, Messi. These are people who I hear now as far as being the greatest. But in my eyes, it's still Pele. He was the blueprint. As far as being a goal scorer on a per game basis, he's still the greatest. All around playmaker. When it comes to, some of the things that he did that he helped to innovate, he's the greatest innovator the sport has ever seen. One thing I learned that he innovated, which happens all the time now, is prior to Pele, players did not attempt goal scores from that far away from the goal. And, he was the first to really try to make that a regular part of his game. He still holds certain records. I believe he holds the Guinness Book of World Records for most goals scored in a career. Depending upon what source you see, it's either 1,279 or 1,283 in 1,367 games. So it's nearly a goal per game. And in his prime, I believe, was over a goal per game. And he also holds the record for most World Cup titles for three. And had it not been for the fact that he was injured in 1966 and 1962, he probably would have won four in a row. And that would have put him in even more lofty territory. And, he played in an era where there was a growing consciousness when it came to athletes. He came of age in the 60s and 70s. And of course, when you're as globally popular as Pele was, you get compared to people, in that stratosphere. For instance, Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali and Pele were the two most popular people on the planet in the 60s and 70s. And Pele received some criticisms. Let me make this point first before I go forward. Pele was from Brazil. He represented Brazil. All right. Um, and he represented Brazil. He was born in 1940. And his father was a soccer slash football player too, who taught him the game. However, they were so impoverished that he didn't have the ability or could afford to play with an actual soccer ball, so he would play with a grapefruit or a sock stuffed with newspaper. And as a kid, he played for several amateur teams. But he joined Santos, which is, I believe, the pro league in Brazil, when he was just, I think, 15, 16 years of age. And he became a starter by the time he was just 16. He was a phenom. He took to this sport like a fish out of water, man. And his popularity absolutely just soared to unbelievable heights. Because, like I said, this is the most popular sport in the world. And he set all types of records. I think in his second season as a goal scorer, he scored 58 goals, a record which still stands today. Um, and when he was at his absolute peak, when he was in his 20s, I remember from listening to the documentary, the opposing team said sometimes like there were like two or three different guys out there with Pele on their shirts. It's like he was everywhere, and he was so great. And when I don't make this Michael Jordan comparison, that teams had to scheme against him. Teams were scheming with double and triple teams against him, but because he was such an intelligent player, and as I said, not just a goal scorer but playmaker, and had exceptional footwork out there on the field and everything, he would set his teammates up to be able to score off of the disadvantage that the team now had, focusing so much on him. And I believe it was that situation which ultimately won the World Cup for Brazil in 1970, because I believe they won in 1958, 1962, and 1970. And they lost 1966, but that was largely because of the fact that he was so injured. And that's another thing that Pele had to deal with that modern day football slash soccer players don't have to deal with. He was consistently beaten up. He was targeted with physicality, and especially by, I'm just going to be honest with you, European teams. I'm not saying racism or anything to do with it, but I mean, it is what it is. Today, and you might have heard about this with Donald Trump with the red card, aggressive plays are red carded, penalized. That wasn't the case back then. Whether or not you want to say soccer was more primitive or whatever, much like the case we make about NBA, soccer slash football in Pele's time was a lot more physical, to the point where they kicked his leg so badly in 1966 that he suffered a fracture, which is why he'd only played in a handful of games in 1966 and why he was hesitant to play in 1970 because of the injuries. And also, um, because of the burden of being Pele, he wasn't enjoying the sport as much as he did. And that's why I brought up Muhammad Ali. In Brazil at this time, at the height of Pele's career, there was a military dictatorship that took over the country in a coup d'etat over the democratically elected government in the mid 1960s. And this was a right wing dictatorship. And this dictatorship cracked down on free speech. Censorship was rampant. No freedom of the press. I believe it was cracked down on certain religions, most definitely political parties. They were definitely anti-communist. They were chased out of the country. That political party was barred from existence in Brazil. This to the new restrictive constitution in the late 1960s. As I said, it stifled freedom of speech, political opposition. They promoted nationalism and economic development. So, on one point that I will make, although it was a repressive regime, it was, how can I put this? It was a repressive regime, but many established uh, countries like the United States tolerated it because, at the very least, they weren't trying to export uh, their revolution or their dictatorship outward, as the Soviet Union was. As they tried to, the Soviet Union were interested in spreading their borders and their revolution to other countries, or as Iran has had goals on trying to export their revolution to other countries. Also, as I said, they were anti-communist, so being the fact that at the time we were in Cold War with the Soviet Union, this type of dictatorship was tolerated by other countries, especially Republican governments, like Nixon and Ford or what have you, right? But as any totalitarian regime will do, those who tried to resist were punished, tortured, imprisoned, and in some instances, yes, even executed. So this brings up some criticisms of Pele, which is probably unfair. He was sometimes unfairly compared to Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, of course, was outspoken, in particular about the Vietnam War, and he did lose a lot, and he risked a lot. He lost 3 years of his prime. We can only surmise how great he would have been had was able to fight for that 1967 to 70 year prime that he was barred essentially from boxing. He was barred economically because of his pro-black stance. He never was able to fully enrich himself in the capitalist system as somebody who would have, been more tolerable for Wall Street or Madison Avenue, I should say. But there's one thing that Muhammad Ali didn't have to worry about that Pele had to worry about, and that is that Pele would have to be concerned about his safety. I'm not saying Ali was totally safe, but the in general, and I know I'm speaking, some people are like, wait a minute, man, you know how the government get down. I know with Fred Hampton, I get it with Dr. King, but I'm talking about in general. The federal government will let you talk. They'll penalize you in other ways, but usually, as far as it'll go is imprisonment. As far as with Ali or taking his livelihood away, Pele could have been dealt with much more severely had he spoken out against the military dictatorship in Brazil. And I think he walked the fine line between not openly criticizing the government of Brazil, but at the same time making sure he wasn't seen as a tool or a token of the repressive regime, right? And that's something I came away with as far as watching this documentary. It's an excellent documentary. After his retirement from Santos and the World Cup in 1970, he would go on to play for an American League for multiple years up until 1977. So he played well past his prime. But, he had a tremendous impact socially and culturally. Pele. I mean, Pele was, like I said, he is the Mike, especially I would say before the last 20 years. He was essentially the Michael Jordan of soccer/football. He was. That's how great he was perceived. He's a national treasure. Even to this day, if I'm not mistaken, I thought I saw this, and I want to make sure I'm not wrong. Give me 1 second. Yeah, that's what I thought. He was such a national treasure that Brazil has a holiday named after him, King Pele Day. It's on November 19th. The date commemorates 1969 when Pele's score was considered his 1,000th career goal while playing for his boyhood club Santos in Rio de Janeiro's iconic Maracana Stadium. And he has many landmarks and buildings, institutions named after him. He's literally he passed away back in 2022, and I thought that, to be honest with you, ESPN did a very poor tribute to him, considering how great he was. They should have had a segment talking about his greatness. All I remember was just a scroll and a mention, and that's it. A 2 minute segment before they went back to the LeBron slurp. But yeah, man, check out that documentary about Pele, man, and greatness personified, man. Tell me what you guys think.